Well, Bouwe, firstly, let me just note that it's really strange to me to say Bouwe because I'm Afrikaans. I want to say Oom the whole time, but let
He
me
also wants to
just.
call me. He also wants to call me Oom the whole time.
It doesn't feel right. I feel so disrespectful. So please, I'm not
I can
very.
see it. I can see it in his like face every time he talks to me. It'll make me feel even older than I feel.
Why is it important for people to have this right to home educate? Why is it such an important thing that we're willing to put so much effort into?
It's a religious and a philosophical question, like who is responsible to care for the child? And I think the law and the Bible and other religious documents are very clear that the care for the children is the responsibility of the parents and not the state. So we are in a battle between the state and parents about who decides what is best for the child. Home education, I think, is a movement that will not only change education, but it will also change other aspects of life. So what happens is families decide to educate their own children. And as soon as they've done that and they experience success, they start thinking, but if I can do this on my own, I can also do that on my own. So that people start to, homeschooling families start to take more responsibility for producing their own food or taking care of their own health care. It's got ripple effects that are far wider than only education.
And welcome to another Learn Free YouTube video. Online, as usual, we have Josua Botha from the Alumni Association of Home Educators.
Hello.
Which means that he's actually been through the whole home education process. And we're very honored today to have Bouwe van der Eems, who is the chairperson of the Pestalozzi Trust and many, many other things in the home education world. We're going to the purpose of today's video is we're going to be interviewing Bouwe to get a bit of a perspective about the long-term history, background of home education, where it came from, where it is now, and where it's going to in South Africa. And Bouwe is most probably the best person that you can find to interview on this. In America, they have founding fathers. And in South Africa, we can say for the home education movement, we have founding families. And the van der Eems family is one of the founding families, and Bouwe is the head of that family. So it's a great honor to have you here, Bouwe. You, along with Leonard van Oostrum, and van Oostrum is also one of the founding families. So it's a great honor, and it's a pleasure and a joy to have you in the studio. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much for the introduction and the opportunity. But I would not classify myself as a founding homeschooler. I think there are a few guys that started much earlier than me, and of which obviously Leonard van Oostrum was there in the first moments, and then also one of the other trustees of the Pestalozzi Trust, Henry Slabbert. So I'm a bit later than them.
Just 5 minutes, like me, always 5 minutes late.
Yeah.
So then how did you start home educating? How did let's start a little bit talking about the van der Eems family and how did your family start home educating? How did you discover home education?
Yeah, we when our children were born, we were living in Pretoria in the same area as Leonard van Oostrum and his family, but we didn't meet them immediately, but we had a lot of friends that started talking about home education, and we started thinking about it. And we decided that this is the right thing for our family to do. It will be good for our family, and it will give us a lot of freedom. So in the area where we were, there was a private Christian school that we planned to send our children to, and we had no problem with that school, but we just thought it is, given that my wife is at home with the children, it's just a natural thing to do, that she also does the education. Otherwise, she changes from a mother to a taxi driver. And yeah, that was so we. The basic motivation is that it's good for the family. You spend more time together, and you can transfer your values, and those were our original motivations.
And roughly when was that? In the what period are we talking about there?
We talk about we started investigating home education in 1999, around then, and we then decided to home educate our children, and when we made that decision, we were not quite right for it. So my eldest son went to school for his first year, and then we took him out of the school. So we started, I think, in 2001. So my eldest son was in the school in the year 2000, and then from 2001 onwards, we home educated our children.
Okay, interesting. Josua?
Yeah. So, what approach did you use? I mean, people use many different kinds of approaches, and that's one of the big discussions. So, how did you guys approach it?
Yeah, we started with a formal curriculum based on the national curriculum statement. At that stage, CAPS wasn't around, so it was the national curriculum statement. And there were a number of curriculums that offered that. So we started with that one. And then we very quickly found out that this is not the right thing. And we started mixing and matching these subjects with one curriculum supplier, and then other subjects with other curriculum suppliers. And then I think at the end of the day, we explored almost all the approaches. So we did some unit studies for a while. We like classical education a lot, so we did some Latin and some Greek and logic and what is it? The other phase of rhetoric, and then and my wife also did some Montessori, not Montessori, Charlotte Mason stuff. So we tried all of them, and we learned from all of them. So we started formal and became more eclectic, and tried different approaches, and at the end of the day, then the children finished off with the matric, and we tried. Different children had different matrics.
And so we should have, we put you on the spot there, of course, because the person we should have been interviewing on that subject was Debbie, your lovely wife, who does so much also in the background often for the home education movement. But please thank Debbie for us as well.
And pulling the conversation a bit more to today, how would you say your approach, or the situation, what you had to do, compares to the day-to-day reality of today, of my generation, and even the new ones who are starting now? How would that compare? Do you think a lot changed?
Yeah, we think a lot of things have changed. So when we started off with home education, the internet wasn't really readily available. So everything was very much paper-based at that stage. But in the early 2000s, there was. I'm in the IT industry, so I had access to the internet by means of a modem, and then the social media at that stage were mailing lists. So there was the Thuis Onderwys mailing list, and we had lots of discussions on that mailing list.
I think my mother is still on that.
Yeah. And at that stage, I think it started off at about 50, and grew to 100 and 200 slowly. It was only in 2010 that it reached the 1,000 mark. But then by that time, Facebook took over, so mailing lists are not that popular anymore. But most of the discussion was on that mailing list. So the internet was not very prevalent. There was no Facebook, there was no WhatsApp. So support groups were very physical. Now, fortunately, we lived in Pretoria, in the Moot area, and there we knew people, and we had lots of support and lots of families that we did things together with. So we had great support groups there. But if you started off at that stage, it wasn't easy to jump on Facebook and find support groups. It was people in smaller cities would have struggled to find yet other homeschoolers in the area. So that's the one thing. The other thing is at that stage, the South African matric was still the old matric. It was 1 year. So most children did the national senior certificate because it was like the GED. You just write your exam and that's it. Only after 2010 did they introduce the 3-year qualification, which made the South African matric very expensive and time consuming. So that was one difference. And then also the new matric options became available in around 2010, like the GED, which is now quite a popular one, that wasn't available in the early years. And I think general acceptance. Nobody in the early 2000s, nobody knew what home education was. But now you can ask anybody in all communities. They all know somebody that's homeschooling, or they've got a family member that's homeschooling. So the concept is not foreign anymore. It's now accepted, and it's the society is generally positive about home education.
And so that leads on quite nicely to maybe the next topic, which is, so thank you. You've given us an interesting insight into the early days of home education, the beep, 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 beep on the modem, and that kind of thing. Josua doesn't know what we're talking about, by the way. Dial-up is a novel concept for Josua.
I just heard a very interesting comparison recently, that we had infrastructure inversion. So in the early days, the telecommunication infrastructure was a voice network, and we used the modems to run voice data over the voice network. But now the network is digital, so we run voice over the internet, but then we ran the internet over voice. That's how it inverted.
I mean, I was so surprised when I heard that voice over IP was illegal for a time. I couldn't believe that. I was like, what? So
absolutely,
yeah,
it
dinosaur.
was.
It seems like ancient stories.
Yeah.
You'll change it so quick. So, let's continue.
So before the techies get carried away. So that was an insight into the early days of home education, some of the challenges and how it's changed. But obviously also you've all along, and you're talking about acceptance of home education, all along you've been involved in what you call the home education movement, and the struggle for recognition for home education. And I think that's something that people who've come to home education later know very little about. It's taken often for quite for granted what those early days were like. I remember certainly in the early days, along with the beep beep of the modem, which was keep your kids inside the house, don't let them answer the phone during school hours, don't let them play outside school, don't let them play outside school hours. There were no going to the ice rinks at 9 o'clock on a Friday morning as a group of 200 home educators. So, and that's changed, and we don't want to be too laudatory, but we want to be honest. You're one of the people that we have to thank for that change. So, take us a little bit back into the development of home education. Where did it start from pre-1994, and what were some of the critical moments in the development of home education from a legal perspective and from a recognition perspective?
Yeah, I think it started in the early 1990s. At that stage, it was we were under the National Party government, and home education was illegal. But home education was, as the public school system expanded, home education became increasingly illegal until it was, because before the 1990s, there were a lot of children in remote areas that couldn't attend school, so they had to make provision for home education. But as I said, as the school system expanded, it was made illegal. And then there was mainly Christian families that had a problem sending their children to public school for religious reasons, and they started with home education. And one of those pioneer families was the Maintjies family, and they were then sentenced to a jail, sent to jail for home educating. I think, yeah, in 1992 or something. So it was highly illegal at that stage, and then Leonard van Oostrum and people like Henry Slabbert, which were the actual real pioneers, they decided we must make sure that we get recognition for home education in South Africa, and they then founded the Association for Home Education in the early 90s, basically to get recognition for home education. And in that period, then the new South Africa arrived. There was the democratic election, and we had a new democratically elected government. And then with the adoption of the constitution, home education was legalized per implication. Then in 1995, around there, I think they started writing the new SA Schools Act. And then at that stage, the association started to interact with the department and try to get recognition for home education. And they also cooperated then with the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, the HSLDA in the USA, and they launched a campaign to get home education recognized. And thanks to that campaign, provision was made for home education in the SA Schools Act in 1996. So the reason for the success of the campaign was that hundreds of American families wrote to the South African embassies in the USA asking them to recognize home education. And at that stage, the South African government was still quite sensitive for foreign pressure, because they hoped to get money and support from the US government, and that probably played a role why they made provision for home education in the SA Schools Act. I think it was a very novel concept at that stage, and I think the government at that stage didn't think that this thing would grow. They thought this will just be some small niche group that will do this, and I think they didn't expect that it will grow to the extent that it's actually grown. So thanks to that campaign, home education was recognized in the SA Schools Act in 1996, and from then on, home education just grew exponential. So our estimates currently are that there are about 140,000 at the beginning of this year. What the effect of COVID is on the numbers is anybody's guess, but probably doubled maybe in this year. We don't know. We'll find out in due time. So, and I think it's becoming a mainstream form of education now, but it all started very small in 1996.
And then you were involved. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah. I think so. That was all done by the association, and in 1998, the association said said what we're sitting with is we've got a government that's generally negative about home education. We've got officials that don't understand home education, that don't understand the law, and these officials will intimidate parents to meet all kinds of unlawful registration requirements, which will cause conflict if home educators try to register. And therefore it was decided to establish a legal defense fund, which is now the Pestalozzi Trust, to assist parents with those potential conflict situations. And I think, yeah.
Yeah, and so the National Association, that National Association actually still exists. It's
yes,
led by Sean Green, I think.
Yes,
and so that's almost, I suppose, the founding body of home education. And you were in the chairmanship at some stage early on, later on.
Yes, I think I started getting involved in 2004, and I think I became the chairman in 2005. And that stage, but in the early years, the associations had many functions. Firstly, it had representative function. It represented the movement or its members. So it could speak with government or the media on behalf of its members. But at that stage, in the early 2000s, late 90s, we must remember communication was expensive. So if you want to communicate with your members, you need to have fax machines, and you need to send physical letters and things like that. And in order to keep a community informed, you need money for your communication services. Therefore, you pay to join the association, and then the association will use those funds to communicate with you, to keep you up to date, and then also to engage with government and the media. And therefore, there was a membership involved. And then because an association could communicate with its members, it also did things like organize sports days and organize expos. It was a logical thing to do that. But in the middle 2000s, communication was suddenly free, and everybody could communicate with many people. And then there was no need for an association to organize expos and things like that. And now the associations are mainly there as a political instrument to engage with government to promote the interest of their members.
And that's something that we'll talk about maybe right at the end when we come to talk about the Liberty Learning Coalition, which is another initiative that you've been involved with. Josua, do you have a question?
So this is, many of these things are very, very new to me. Like I haven't been engaged in these things. It happened, and you know, these things when you're small, when you're young, it just happens. You know, this is where we go. This is what we're doing. I remember I was once asked by someone if we were registered, and frankly, I don't know. I literally did not know.
Today, you don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I never asked. And I'm done. I'm through. So many of those things I'm oblivious to. But I would like to ask more about where you're currently involved, and that's the Pestalozzi Trust. Like, how does that work? What's different from that from the National Association?
Okay, the important thing is an association is a representative body. So the association talks on behalf of its members. And that's why it needs membership, and it needs a elected management committee that then democratically elected by members to empower them or to authorize them to speak on behalf of their members. Now, the Pestalozzi Trust is not a representative body. We don't represent anybody. We are a service provider. We offer the service of legal defense. We've got expertise in the legal field, and we will defend if your rights are infringed on. So the management committee of the trust, or the executive committee of the trust, is not elected by anybody. So the trust is governed by a board of trustees, and yet when originally the association then appointed a number of trustees, they defined what the objectives and the goal of the trust is, and those those things are in the founding documents of the trust, and the trustees are responsible for executing that goal, and that goal doesn't change, that it stays the same. So and the trustees is a self-perpetuating structure. So when trustees resign, the trustees appoint new trustees. So we don't, with the goal, with the purpose of executing the goals of the trust. The reason why that was done was, if you've got an association, it can be easily hijacked. Sorry, I must just, okay, there. It can easily be hijacked by other parties. So if you've got an association, you must have an annual general meeting every year. And you must invite all your members to attend the annual general meeting. And then they appoint or elect a management committee. So association can then easily be hijacked by people that have got other goals in life. You want to ask something, Joshua? Okay. So usually AGMs are attended by very few people. Anybody that's been in association will know that. So if you feel that you want to take over an AGM, you and a few friends can just go join the association and then attend the AGM, ensure that you and your buddies are elected in the committee, and then you can change the direction of the association to go in a total other direction. So that is the danger of an association.
So if I can summarize it, I understand it as the trust is literally there to entrust something. They've been given care of a specific vision and goal, and that's the paramount purpose of this trust. It's to uphold this specific goal, and that goal is defending the rights of home educators in South Africa.
Yeah, and
members.
That,
yes.
Yeah, so originally the trust only defended homeschooling families, but in 2010 we also decided to expand that to small schools. So we currently also have members that are small schools, but that is a decision that it is in general, it's the same goal as what we do for homeschoolers. We just do it for a different category of members, and that was agreed by the trustees that we'll make that change.
Okay.
So just a couple of things, interesting things come. Of course, one of the key things there is that the trust essentially, one of its jobs, I suppose, is to use the membership contributions in order to build up a fund to fund legal action, which is very expensive, and was one of the ideas of having the self-perpetuating trust in order to protect that fund from some other party coming in and then using those funds irresponsibly, that kind of thing.
Yes, that is also one of the reasons for a trust. We are registered as a trust for public benefit, which allows us to, which exempts us from income tax, so that enabled us to build up funds. So we've got a fund that enables us to handle court cases, and except for people that are in the executive committee, yet the trustees are not compensated for their duties, and they get no financial benefit from it. So yet all the trustees in the capacity of trustees that are not compensated for those duties.
And I suppose we're talking around this, we're talking about people, but I think my understanding, and this was from my very early days in home education, was that particularly in America, they had an HSLDA actually advised the trust and its formation. They'd had a problem where teachers' unions had come in and taken over homeschool associations or homeschool trusts or bodies that raised funds for home education to defend it.
Yeah, that can easily happen. If you've got an association, then it can easily be taken over by teacher unions by just attending the AGM. Yeah, and at that stage, I wasn't part of that, but I would guess that there were close ties between people like Leendert and the HSLDA, and that decision to establish a trust rather than an association was taken in consultation with the HSLDA.
Now, we've spoken quite a bit about the Pestalozzi Trust, and we'll maybe come back to that if we have time. And of course, we hope to maybe later on interview Karen van Oostrom, who's got a long history, of course, with the trust. But you were also, of course, involved with another body, which is when you moved, I'm assuming from the work down to Cape Town, you became involved with the Cape Home Educators, which is one of the oldest associations in the country. And the Cape Home Educators also then was involved in quite a controversial issue where there was some talk about provincial policy being done in the Western Cape, and you mounted a very successful campaign there, and was probably for the first time flexed the political muscle of home educators. I know you were very involved in that, so maybe you'd like to tell us a little bit about CHE and their very famous campaign.
Yeah, I don't think I was in the committee of the CHE during that campaign, but I was for a few years in the committee. I was never chairman of the CHE. Yes, but it was a very exciting time. It was actually, Leendert used to call it in the early 2000s, that we are sort of homeschooling in the sun, and there was very, very little conflict between homeschooling families and the Department of Education. And we seriously doubted if it was still necessary to have these associations, because we had very few people registered, and those that registered had no problems. There was no conflict. And suddenly in 2014, everything changed, and it started in the Western Cape. And I just did some searching. So the Western Cape, and at that stage, the Minister of Education in the Western Cape was the Honourable Donald Grant, published a very draconian policy on home education. And I think the main problems with the home education was that they prescribe curriculum. And I'm just reading here from an article on the matter, that it said that the curriculum used by homeschoolers must cover the contents and skills of the National Curriculum Statement. Exactly the same words, I realized, then bellable. That was the main objection to that policy. And then also the idea that you must register before a certain date. In this case, they said you must register before 30 September for the following year in order to register. So those are the main objections. And there was Leendert flew down from Pretoria, and we had a meeting with the Cape Home Educators during their sports day, and we had a very successful campaign. We had many people wrote letters, many people phoned the department. In the whole process, they got hold of the cell phone number of Donald Grant, And and within 3 weeks, the policy was withdrawn. Yeah, and then the Western Cape sort of left this whole thing over to national government, and then national government started with the policy and Bella Bill, and the rest is history.
And the rest is history. But seeing as we're talking about the Western Cape, if anyone ever wants to see the Van der Eems family, the place to do that is to go to a homeschool expo, a home education expo in the Western Cape, because you'll find Bouwe and his kids usually with electrical cords around, because without Bouwe there would be no power. But you've been very involved with the expos. I don't know if Josua has been to many expos. He can tell us in a second. Tell us a little bit about the expos, because they've got much more organized from the very early days that I remember them. Many more people joining and many more exhibitors. And you've become quite formally involved in those. So tell us a little bit about the expos, their development over time.
Well, let me just say that I remember vaguely when I was small going, but when I was really young, but not recent.
Yeah, the expos is an interesting history. So they've been expos for many years. I think I can still remember when in Pretoria there were a few expos in the Rooihuis Kraal terrein. And they were organized by Leonard and Karen. And then at some stage they stopped with that. And then there were volunteers that said, well, there's a need for an expo, we must organize it. But it is a huge effort to organize an expo. So expos, and for that reason, expos were, yet sometimes there is one and sometimes there's not. So they were very irregular. But there were some volunteers that put in a lot of effort into organizing expos. So there was somebody in Johannesburg that did it for a few years. It was fantastic. Well, I wasn't there myself, but the feedback I got was that it was really good. I can't remember the lady. She lived there in the Bekloo area, I think she lived, and she organized a expo there. And then the Cape Home.
I remember some of those. Yeah, they were
Sandra, I think, was her name.
Yeah, those were you know, and at that stage also in the early days, that was also one of the, as you say, you couldn't easily go on the internet and look up homeschooling resources and get a whole list of things. Yeah. So the expos were a lot of people went to the expos to buy the material for the next year. But sorry, you were telling us about how they developed.
And the Cape Home educators organized the expo in Cape Town. They were very organized, and they had really had organized great expos. And there was somebody in Durban as well that occasionally organized the expo there. And then what happened is the person in Johannesburg, okay, let me go back. So at that stage, I've been starting this website, SA Homeschoolers. And one of the features of the website is I publish the events. So I try to promote the events by putting it on my website as early as possible. So I engage with all these volunteers saying, when is your expo and when is your expo? And I put the stuff in there. And then one year, the person in Johannesburg said, no, she's not going to do it this year. I think she's got a baby, or her child is a matric or something, and she's just not willing to do it anymore. And then on the mailing list, I asked, is there any other volunteer that wanted to do it? And there was none. And then I realized having expos on a volunteer basis is not a sustainable model anymore. We must change it to a commercial model so that the people that organize the expos are compensated for their efforts. And then I've contacted many organizations that could do this, and eventually started working with the people at Kragdag. And then they started, I think in 2013, I think, was the first homeschool expo in Johannesburg, which was done on a commercial model. So we do a budget, and we charge with market-related fees for the exhibitors and for the visitors to make it a sustainable model, and it's been very successful. And but we didn't compete with the volunteers. So if there was a volunteer that organized the expo in a different province, we didn't interfere with them. We didn't compete with them. So we only did, for a number of years, only had an expo in Joburg. And then the volunteer that ran the expo in Cape Town for many years with lots of success also sort of stopped working on it, and there was nobody to take over. So then we implemented the commercial model in Cape Town as well, and then a few years later in Durban as well. So now we've got a sustainable model for organizing expos, but that has now obviously encountered some problems with the COVID crisis. But we're now busy developing an online platform, so we working on an online expo, but the dates still need to be confirmed.
Okay, so you actually are working on something online this year, so there will be some form, and is that going to be sort of regional or national, or have you worked on how you're going to do that? I suppose it can reach everywhere now. International, I suppose it can be international now. Reach out into Africa now.
Yes. Yeah, so we'll see what it can do, but obviously it's not limited geography anymore. And we've been thinking about online because that's the trend. And this crisis is just sort of accelerated things that we've been thinking about already.
Right. So you mentioned this and a little bit while you're talking about it, because you also have, in a sense, kind of a permanent expo, which is the SA Homeschooler site. It's as far as I'm aware, the largest home education site in South Africa. So you also, along with all your other hats, you wear the hat of running that. So tell us a little bit about that site. What does it do?
Yeah, well, it actually started with the association. While I was still chairman of the National Association, we because communication became free, there was no need for membership anymore. And we in 2007, I think, we stopped. We made the membership of the National Association free, and then I wanted to use a website for people to join. And then when I started that website, I started getting requests, but can't we advertise on this website, and can't we do this? And then the scope of the association website, it became disjointed with its original purpose, namely just a place for people to join the association. So therefore I divorced those two websites and said there is a need for a website where there's independent information on home education that asks all the frequently asked questions, and also creates a platform for the providers of educational service to advertise their products and services. And that's what it's been doing. I think we started it in 2011, so it's 9 years old already, and it's been growing steadily over the years. And it's also a commercial website. You pay for advertising space, and those funds maintain the website and make it sustainable.
Yeah, I think our time is running short. I think we should talk a little bit more about the trust, especially the fact that you took over after the passing of Leonard van Oostrum. I remember his name from a long time. He's always been in all these things involved very, very much, and that must have been quite a just what was that like? What's happening currently with the trust and the Liberty?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I think when Leonard van Oostrum passed away, it was, and I became chairman, it was a daunting task, because Leonard van Oostrum was really a special person. He was, he knew, he understood the law. He could brief attorneys on all kinds of complex legal issues. He understood all the governance issues of the trusts and the trustees. He had an in-depth knowledge of the law. He had an in-depth knowledge of education. He understood all the educational models and how children learn and all those things. So to replace somebody like that is just impossible. So when somebody asks me now, how are you going to replace him? So the only way to replace Leonard van Oostrum is to get more people involved, because they are not people with all those talents in one person. So I think the Pestalozzi Trust has grown, thankfully, because its membership grown. We could get more people involved. So Christopher is an advisor to the trust and assists a lot with legal issues for us. Karen runs the office, and there are there's some other people that help her with all the activities that she does. She talks to the members every day and handles all the administration. And then through the coalition, we're getting more people involved to handle the political aspects, to engage with government and we've for dealing with the media, we've got a whole group of homeschool ambassadors. Originally, we had all those functions that are now performed by the ambassadors and the office, and legal liaison and parliamentary liaison. All those things we do were done by one person at that stage. But so we've got many people doing many things, and my focus is just to coordinate the actions.
But under your leadership, the trust has gone from strength to strength, and last year was 21 years old. How has the COVID-19 crisis affected the trust? Is membership growing very dramatically? How has that impacted the trust?
Yeah, so the membership of the trust has started growing quite fast. I think it's grown slowly, and then it picked up a lot in 2015 when we had the court case in KwaZulu-Natal. So I think, and together with the policy in the Western Cape, I think, and then there was a court case in KZN where children were taken away from their parents because they homeschooled. I think people realized we do need a legal defense fund, because government can interfere with our home education. So that was after we had a long quiet period. Suddenly these things happened, and people realized, but if there's nobody to defend us, if the government interferes with our home education, then we're in trouble. So I think it started growing since 2015, and then Bella Bill again. With the announcement of Bella Bill, the membership started growing even more. But I can remember before 2015, the trust always had December, January, let's say January until end of March, with a busy period when all the people renewed their membership. And then there was the quiet period, and Leonard van Oostrum could tour over the country and do workshops and visit all kinds of people. But since 2015, there was no, the quiet period was not that quiet anymore. People were continually joining. But the January period, February period is still a very busy period. And then it's just a little bit quieter the rest of the year. But what Karen experienced in the office, that the last few months are like January, when everybody tries to renew their membership. So I don't know what the final numbers are, but the COVID has significantly increased our membership.
So which is of course good news, because every member helps to contribute to that fund that you've been carefully nurturing over 21 years. And like Einstein said, the most powerful force in the universe is compound interest.
Yes, and then obviously we can do new things that we couldn't do before, like promoting research and things like that.
Now, so talking about new things, and we will actually have to obviously have you back on, because time is getting short, to talk about the activities of the trust, particularly since 2015, 2016, 2017, the introduction of the Bella Bill, the introduction of the policy on home education. There's been a very, very busy period, and you've led some very powerful initiatives, urgent campaigns worked up over the weekend with thousands of letters going in. So we'll get you back to speak about that. But talking about new initiatives, one of the new initiatives that you've been critically involved in is the Liberty Learning Coalition. The young man up on my left-hand side, he's a new, young, and forceful voice. The Alumni Association is like we can call them the youth wing of the home education movement. The real radicals are in there. I don't know if we have to. I don't know at what age we're going to make them leave the youth wing, if it's going to be 40 like the ANC or whatever, but we'll see there. But they're the dynamic young voice of home education in the country. And Josua has been taking a very dramatic lead in that initiative. But tell us a little bit about the Liberty Learning Coalition, one of the ideas that you've promoted, and then perhaps we should probably close off on that note.
Yeah, again, it's not a new idea. The coalition has sort of the coalitions have been formed at various occasions. So in those 90s, in the middle 90s, when the SA Schools Act was drafted, the National Association wasn't the only association. The Eastern Cape Association was also established in those early years, and the Cape Home Educators. And in those years, they also acted as a coalition, where then the provincial associations also engaged with the provincial authorities. And one of our current trustees, Andre Williams, at that stage was in the Eastern Cape, and he was very active in the Eastern Cape. So at that stage, when there was this campaign for the SA Schools Act, the organizations worked together as a coalition, and then it was when quiet again, the coalition stopped functioning. And in 2014 and 2015, when we had these discussions with the national department, the various associations and the Pestalozzi Trust attended those meetings, but then we also cooperated as a coalition. So at that stage, we sort of re-established the coalition, and we had proposed possible solutions to the department at that stage as a coalition. And I think now that things are heating up, and Bella Bill is on its way to Parliament, it's important that we've got many voices, many independent voices, but we've got a unified front. And I think that is the motivation to start working, establishing the coalition, start working together, define what do we agree on, and on what areas can we cooperate, and that is the purpose of the coalition. And we are very thankful for the contributions of people like you, Christopher, and Josua. It's really exciting to be involved in that coalition.
So the coalition is a group of like many different organizations, from the Cape Homeschoolers to the Gauteng Homeschoolers to like the Pestalozzi Trust, and some individuals, and then a few homeschool alumni. But it's a very large group of eclectic, let's say, organizations working together on just agreeing on one important thing, and that is that there should be freedom to educate children in a way that's specific to each child, that's best for that child, and that does include home education in many cases, and that's the main agreement.
Yeah, and
Christopher, you disappeared.
I made it back. It's been very exciting. It's been very exciting to hear all those different voices and to see many more people coming in. And as we said, a very impressive list of representative associations and bodies and groups and people who are contributing to that goal. So I want to most probably start closing off now and say, maybe give Josua a chance to ask maybe one last question, and then we'll wrap up and maybe see if you've got also some final words for us. But let me ask Josua if he's got anything to say.
Well, Bouwe, firstly, let me just note that it's really strange to me to say Bouwe because I'm Afrikaans. I want to say Oom the whole time, but
He also wants to call me Oom the whole time.
It doesn't feel right. I feel so disrespectful. So please, I'm not very.
I can see it in his face every time he talks to me. It will make me feel even older than I feel.
So let's just get that out of the way. I have to remind myself about that. But I think the last question I would like to ask is, why is it important for people to have this right to home educate? Why is it such an important thing that we're willing to put so much effort into?
Yeah, I think it's a religious and a philosophical question, like who is responsible to care for the child? And I think the law and the Bible and other religious documents are very clear that the care for the children is the responsibility of the parents and not the state. So we are in a battle between the state and parents about who decides what is best for the child. I think from that perspective, it's important. But then also, home education, I think, is a movement that will not only change education, but it will also change other aspects of life. So what happens is families decide to educate their own children. And as soon as they've done that and they experience success, they start thinking, but if I can do this on my own, I can also do that on my own. So that people start to, homeschooling families start to take more responsibility for producing their own food or taking care of their own health care. So it's got ripple effects that are far wider than only education. So I've listened to a ebook of or audio book of about agriculture, and what he said is there was no interest in his altered or traditional way of agriculture, but when the first group of people that started showing an interest in what he was doing were the homeschoolers. So that's, I think, two reasons why I think
that's very well articulated. It's sort of, if I hear you correctly, it's almost sort of this two sides of the same coin. It's the responsibility, but that comes with this liberty that we believe in, that as part of democratic societies that's enshrined in the Constitution, but that comes with a responsibility. And these parents see it as a big thing to take up this responsibility, and then it ripples to other responsibilities that they also start taking up, which are not only educationally linked. So okay, I think that's almost a good place to end. Christopher will give us the last statement, and then we'll have to end it all.
Well, thank you both for coming to talk to us, to share your extensive experience. Thank you also to Debbie and to the family who've done so much over the years for home education. Thank you personally again for all that you've done. We'll definitely have you back to elaborate on some other subjects, but we really want to thank you. And then goodbye to everyone. I'll let everyone say goodbye. Please subscribe, follow us. press the bell, and we'll be chatting again on matters home education and matters educational from the Learn Free YouTube channel. So thank you very much. That's goodbye from me, and I'll give everyone else a chance to say goodbye.
Yes, thank you, Bouwe. I really appreciate everything you've done.
You had to get that in. You had to get that in.
And yes, thank you for joining us for the conversation and sharing your insights. And
well, thank you for running this channel. I think we can do with all these channels to get discussion going, and thank you for giving this opportunity. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for watching.
Bye.
Goodbye.